Like our realities would be different if all we got was support. There would always be detractors, and you almost need to turn that into fuel.
Welcome to the Anatomy of a Founder podcast. We are so excited to have you. And before we dive into more about yourself and Belong and everything you've been up to, I am just curious, what have you been up to in the past week, 2 weeks? Anything interesting or fascinating?
Yes, actually. So I just got back from spending about 10 days in the US on the West Coast. So I haven't been back to California in about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So I went to school out there, went to Stanford, and we had our reunion, our class reunion. And it was really interesting to kind of be in the tech hub of the world after taking that hiatus. So COVID happened, and then I've been busy with Belong, but just to see how fast things have moved forward in the last 5 years. And really interestingly, taking my first ride in a Waymo.
Really? How was that?
It was insane, Jen.
Yeah.
Honestly, like my friends who live in San Francisco are all now used to it.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, just seeing these cars riding along the road with no driver.
Yeah. I see some of the videos that people post on social media, and I'm like, you're in an Uber right now? Very nerve-wracking to people.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. They literally look like a bunch of ghosts driving cars around the city. And the first 2 days, I was just fascinated. And then we rode in one, which really was cool. But yeah, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah. You're probably like, where's all the black cabs and what?
Yeah. And it's just become normal.
Yeah.
I got back mid last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got over the jet lag. You're all good to go.
Got over the jet lag. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, good to go. It was lovely to be back in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It's a special place. I always say the air out there is just different.
Yeah.
Just full of inspiration.
Well, for the audience who doesn't know you, and for the people who are really keen to hear more about Belong, do you just want to dive into what Belong is all about and where you started and where you are now?
So I was raised in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, so a developing country, about 1.4 million people, so quite a small island, and I was not raised with a lot of money, right? We had just enough, and I a couple of things. So I've always been sort of a disciplined person, somebody who was, be it with money. So my first experience with money was, my godfather used to give me an allowance, $20 a day, $20 every fortnight, not a day. I wish it was a day, every fortnight. So $40 a month as a child, right?
Yep.
Just to save up, and I would save that money and in a Pringles tin where I cut a slit on the lid, and I would save that money, and just saved it. And like my sisters would come and they would borrow, and I would keep track of it, and just save that money, and just always kind of had this organized sort of, I knew what I wanted. If I wanted to save up for a bike, I saved my money, I got the bike. Just very determined, focused, right, in a sense. And then I think when I look back on it, the way I left Trinidad was interesting. Belong is a wealth building platform at its core, and we are building the first truly customer centric wealth building experience. We like to think of it as an experience, and it's really about inspiring, motivating people. We're really targeting customers between the ages of 25 and 45. Of course, we have outliers, but that's our target kind of age group. And motivating these people to start investing, right? A lot of them for the first time. About 40% of our customers today are first-time investors choosing to start that journey on Belong. So motivating them to start investing and then build their wealth in a sustainable way with a true long-term perspective. So it's in our name, Belong, which is a nice triple entendre, we like to say. So kind of be long-term in your thinking, be long the market, like buy stocks, invest, versus going short, which means selling. So being long is sort of buying in and holding, and then belonging to our community and this sort of movement that we're creating in wealth building. So that's what belong is, and the sort of mission behind it is getting people to start investing, take this long-term perspective, but then also to be customer centric in how we build. And we've really taken that seriously from day one, building with our customers, not just for them, but with them, and really trying to crack open this problem of cash savings in the UK, and trying to kind of move that cash into the stock market and help people build wealth.
I was actually explaining it to someone the other day, because I always get asked, you know, like, who's my favorite startups I've interviewed, or who's someone really cool lately. And I've sometimes, like, I do kind of gravitate towards belong in a way, because I just really, like, I remember when I first met you and Sam, and I was like, guys, this is really cool. Like, why haven't I heard about this before? And I think it was like the first thing I said in our interview. But it was interesting, because I was explaining, I think it was the boost loan feature, which I'll let you speak about probably better than I can. And the person I was speaking with was like, wow, that actually really makes sense. But, you know, I think she studied economics, and like, she still doesn't even understand like the whole thing about investing and compounding, and not that she doesn't understand it, she's just never heard it so simplified. And I think that's what's really interesting about it. So do you want to kind of explain a little bit more about the boost loan?
You touched on something that's really interesting, Jen, and it's an insight a key insight that we had in building this business, is that we're not dealing with a literacy gap, so to speak. The people investing on Belong are educated people, right? Like, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're consultants. These are people who took Finance 101. But where the gap is really in sort of the language, how they're spoken to, how they're met where they are in their own context, right? And sort of, you know, really embedding ourselves into the community and the conversation, motivating people, inspiring them. That's where the gap is. So it's really interesting that you said that. So going to the boost loan. So the boost loan was born out of, again, speaking to our customers and the sort of really in-depth research that we did in the beginning, trying to understand from our target customers, why aren't you investing? I didn't for a very long time, although I studied finance and I was an investment banker. It just doesn't make sense, right? So why are you sitting on cash, and what's going on? And really trying to understand the psychology behind it. And a lot of what we were hearing were things like, I don't feel like I have enough to get started. That was a really key theme. And then you say, well, how much is enough? And it's like, well, I don't really know, but it just doesn't feel like enough. It just feels like when I start investing, I need to go in there with a big bang, right? A big number, for it to feel meaningful. So we got a lot of that. And then we also got things like, I like the liquidity. I like the cash in the bank. Like when I open my mobile banking app and I see that number, hopefully 2 or 3 zeros, it feels good.
Safety net.
It's a safety net. It feels comforting. It's like a, you know, comfort blanket. Some people are immigrants, and it's something that Sam and I, it really resonates with me. We're both immigrants, and people send money home. And I've been sending money home since I graduated university to this day, to my family. And, you know, when you're an immigrant and you do that, you have a different relationship with cash, right? Like, you know, it's sort of like if there's an emergency at home, a health emergency, we need to pay for something, that cash needs to be there.
You need the safety net.
Yes, and investing it feels like giving it away or locking it up somewhere, and you almost feel guilty doing that. So, and we heard things like discipline. Like, I've started at one point, I put some money in, cancel the direct debit. I've never had the discipline to save on a recurring basis. So these are some of the things we heard, and at the same time, what was happening was, you know, there's a lot of gambling going on, a lot of gambling-like behavior. You know, meme stocks, GameStop, all of that stuff was happening. And Sam is very passionate about using behavioral science to sort of help people make better financial decisions. And she did her master's thesis on the determinants of gambling addiction in South Africa, in the townships of South Africa. So she really understood this. And so we kind of said, you know, what if we gave people a bit more money to invest up front, right? Made it feel more meaningful. gave them the gratification that they're going in with a larger investment, which will compound and it will grow faster. The more you invest, the longer you leave it, the faster it grows. Right? That's compounding, right? So £2 is going to grow faster than £1 in the market. Just on a everyday, the growth that you get is doubled if you invest double upfront. So we thought, why don't we do that? We do it with property, right? You can go to the bank and get a mortgage with some cash, and then you borrow the rest of it and you buy a property, an asset. And then you pay back the loan every month.
Which actually doesn't necessarily compound. It's actually
which doesn't necessarily, exactly.
It's like when you buy a car and you drive it off the lot, it
loses actually 20%, right? So we use a debt or a loan in other ways in our lives that are sort of accepted, and we don't really think twice about it. But here we are, the S&P 500, the broad market, it goes up and down every day. But over the long term, you look at the trajectory, it's upward. And if you're thinking long, that's kind of all you should really be concerned about. So why don't we do that, right? If we can take a loan to buy a car that depreciates 20% when you drive it off the lot, why not give people a bit of a boost to go into the markets with more money? It will compound faster over the long term. And then with the people who are concerned about having the cash, what the boost does is that it gives you the larger investment, but you only sort of invest half of the cash. So if you have £1,000, we have a £500 minimum to join Belong, but a £1,000 minimum boost loan. So if you have £1,000, you can get a loan for up to another £1,000. So up to 1 times your cash. You can get a loan for, it's an instant decision on the platform. It's optional. 70% of our customers have taken a boost loan to date. So you can apply, you have a decision within seconds, and then that boost loan money meets up with your cash, and £2,000 goes into the market the next day on your behalf. It's your account. You can invest it in broad market funds, so we don't have stock trading or stock picking. Just buy the broad market, buy the US market, the world market, the UK market, the European market. That money goes in, and then you pay back the boost loan every month in little bits over 5 years, very much like a mortgage. And interestingly, Jen, what we're seeing for the people who felt like they lacked discipline to invest, we're seeing the boost it functions as a commitment device. So it's sort of like, you get the money up front, it's in the market growing for you, you're paying back the loan. And it's really building up that habit. You feel more committed because you're in the structure of a loan product to pay it back. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, and on the behavior thing as well, I think when people take out loans for cars or houses, it's that instant gratification in a way. Like they have something tangible and concrete and it's there, so they feel that. But I guess when you're investing, it's almost like nothing is there. Like you've just sent it out into the universe. And you mentioned a lot about investment, you mentioned a lot about behavior, and I know this might sound repetitive because I'm sure you've said it so many times, but for those who don't know, really keen for you to explain how you and Sam met. Really think you guys have such good complementary skills, especially for what you're doing at Belong.
So Sam and I met about 4 years ago. And we were introduced by a mutual friend. So one of my Stanford classmates was the co-founder of Nutmeg, Nick Hungerford. So after we graduated Stanford, he came back to the UK and founded the first digital robo-advisor in Europe. Nutmeg was, or is, I should say. And founded and grew that company. So he was very passionate about wealth building and about cracking this open and getting people to take that first step. And that's what Nutmeg was. And I had been doing fintech investment banking, fintech product, and had been talking to him about sort of this itch to take everything that I had learned, everything that I had done in my career to date, my talent, every single part of me, and apply it to something really impactful. And the wealth building sort of problem with our generation, the millennial generation, has always been something that I've been passionate about. And then Nick had simultaneously been speaking to Samantha Sam, she always thinks it's funny when I call her Samantha, but Sam, he had met her at London Business School. So he had lectured one of her entrepreneurship classes. Where they were studying the nutmeg case study, and he joined the class as the founder and sort of listened to the students discuss the case, and then the professor would reveal that he's in the class. So she had just gone through that, and Nick mentioned something when he spoke about behavioral science, because he did believe in it as well. Triggered something in Samantha. She then followed up with him and started talking to him about the same thing. She had done her studies on gambling addiction. Was really passionate about using that science to help people make better financial decisions. And I was speaking to him about more the rational side of it. I had done investment banking, I'd done leverage finance, I understood the way capital markets work and the way leverage works, or debt, and was sort of speaking to him from that sort of lens. And he just said to me, I met this very interesting person. You guys are talking about the same problem with equal amounts of passion using different language. And I really believe that this is what it will take to, in sort of the next wave of wealth tech platforms, it's gonna take this combination of rational and behavioral to really sort of apply the financial thinking to human behavior, right? And the ability to understand the blockers. And meet customers where they are. And so he put us together, and that was the beginning of Belong. And then he continued to mentor us until he passed away a couple of years ago.
And were you in the UK at the time, or were you still in the West Coast when you were?
When we started, I was in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah.
And remind me what brought you to the UK in the first place after uni?
Yeah, so after my MBA at Stanford, where I met Nick, I went back into investment banking for a couple of years in the US. I had done that prior to my MBA. But I went back and I was just like adamant about working in fintech. So fintech was just emerging as a thing in the US. There was a time when fintech did not exist. We just
at least
had
the term.
We just had, or at least the term, exactly.
Yeah.
We just had big incumbent banks, and people weren't using smartphones yet, right? There was a time where like all of this kind of just wasn't there yet. Everything was done on paper. And so fintech was emerging as a space, and it was really sort of payday lending and prepaid cards, right? That's how fintech started. And so I wanted to work in fintech. I had just done Stanford. PayPal was emerging. Stripe. All of these things were just happening in Silicon Valley, and I was just exposed to all of this at the early stages. So came back, did fintech investment banking for a couple of years, and then I ended up working at a fintech that was a client of mine in banking, leading up one of their largest product lines, Clover Point of Sale. So it's a point of sale system for small businesses. Kind of one of the first that had touchscreen, kind of the iPad structure at the point of sale with an app market. So Clover was the first to do an app market for small businesses where you could actually build apps like accounting and inventory and all of that. So I led that product launch in the US and then moved to London with Clover. So they wanted to expand the platform into Europe. So I said, I'll go launch the UK. And just thought it would be just an exciting, I loved doing the US launch and seeing that scale up. Now it's probably the leading smart point of sale platform for SMBs in the US today. I just wanted to do it all over again. So I said, I'll come to London. It's supposed to be 18 months.
Stuck around.
And then once the UK was launched, they kind of said, you want to do Germany? And I said, well, yeah, I'll do Germany. And that was pretty challenging. To get into Germany, and then Austria, and then Ireland, and then the Netherlands before I stepped away. And that was when I met Samantha.
Yeah. Well, I just find it interesting because at the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about going back to Stanford, doing your class reunion, feeling that energy in the air that's there. And so many people talk about it. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are. Is that same energy here? Like, what do you see as the cultural differences? I've been thinking a lot about ambition lately, talking to a lot of people about what that looks like. But you love it. I mean, Belong's done really well here. So what are your thoughts about just the differences? Would you have done it in Silicon Valley, or what was your decision of doing it here?
Yeah, so the decision to do it here was, I mean, we were physically here, and it was sort of the tail end of COVID, right? So just logistically, it made sense to stay and launch in the UK. Sam and I were both living here. We had networks here. We did our initial customer research here. And the problem existed here, right? So there's almost 300 billion of cash in the UK system earning 0% interest. We believe about 200 billion of that is sitting with our target customers. So the problem is massive, and it's here. And the ecosystem in the UK, in London, it's a strong ecosystem, right? And it was conducive to us starting the business here. Also the regulatory framework, the structure here is one regulator. They're principles based. They like the innovation and belong. And so we felt like everything, the stars aligned.
Yeah.
And then we started immediately speaking to investors about our pre-seed and got a lot of traction with it quite quickly. So it worked. And I think with Silicon Valley, it is such a special place, Jen. Like, I always tell people it's the air out there is different. Like I was sitting in a coffee shop while I was there, and it's quite common to have this experience. It was not my first time. And just listening to the conversations happening around you, like I was there and it was literally like, two partners at a VC fund, and I could hear them speaking about their thesis and what they're interested in. And then there's like a couple of students sitting at the table next to me, and they're working on a project. And it's quite common to just have that. And I think there's something special about the epicenter, right? It is the epicenter of tech, the global epicenter of tech, where it's such a small place to have all of that wealth of knowledge, capital, courage, just everything happening right there. And then some great schools feeding sort of great engineering and product talent, design talent into that ecosystem. So you have Berkeley, you have Stanford, you have Caltech. And yeah, it just creates, I don't know, just a really special environment.
I like the word courage. I feel like I've been exploring a lot of skills, qualities, characteristic traits of founders lately, but courage is yet to come up. So that said, one of my questions actually was going to be, do you think there is any one prerequisite that you need to be a founder?
Gosh, to be a founder, Jen, this might be interesting. Now looking back, I'd say courage. But I think when I started it, I would not have had the kind of that vantage point to say courage at the time. I think now definitely in hindsight. What came to me immediately when you asked the question was naivete.
Yes, I've heard that one before.
That came to me.
Yeah.
And I had it. I had studied, I had worked for a long time. I had mentors and advisors. I had other founders telling me exactly what the journey is going to be like. But I had the naivete of being a first-time founder with a big dream, right? And a lot of just drive. And I really value that, because I think if I didn't have that naivete to think, I'm going to succeed, nothing's going to stop me, like this is going to be massive. I'm building the next like global decacorn fintech, right? And we're going to be the first to allow people to take out a mortgage on the stock market, a mortgage-like product and stuff, all of that stuff. If I had known sort of like, the challenges and all of that up front, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done it. And the challenges have made this great and an amazing journey. But if I had known how hard it would be and sort of the things we'd have to overcome, the adversity we'd have to face, I wouldn't have done it. That naivete was the fuel in the beginning.
Yeah, it's really interesting because literally, I think it was yesterday, I was speaking with someone about ambition and how I think everybody has it, but some people just lack the confidence to maybe show it. You know, I feel like, and I'm American, so I also understand this like cultural difference where sometimes people will just walk into a conversation and they'll be like, what's your big dream? And everybody's like, what? Like, or you say something, and then a lot of people have like, oh, well, you have to do this first, or you have to do this. And it's kind of that logical thinking behind it. But nobody has yet to pin that down to the thought of naivety. Because why not speak your dreams into existence? And at the end of the day. And I guess if you get tripped up on all of the things that could prevent it from coming true, you just get too stuck on those. So just dream big, aim big, and then deal with it along the way. Is that, I guess, the ultimate?
Yeah, that's what I say, you know, dream big but step small. Yeah. Right? That's kind of what it is. And, you know, especially when you're doing something as pioneering as that boost loan concept and that product, you know, because it would always be the first reaction from banks, lenders, investors would be like,
they don't have naivety.
Like, what are you doing? Like, and then we'd always just love seeing them go on that journey. And a lot of times Samantha and I just sit back in the meeting and we don't really say much, and they go on the journey out loud, just kind of rationalizing, picking it apart, and then people land at, why hasn't this been done before? This is a no-brainer. We do it for property, you know. And it's just really interesting to see that journey happen. But yeah, the naivete to kind of just step in and tackle this, that was it. And I think there's a lot of people, you know, people who haven't finished university yet, you know, they just want to go out and start. There's people who have been in their career for 10-15 years and they're just like, they have that itch. What would you say to someone who's, I guess, waiting for that right moment? Is there ever such a thing as a right moment? It's a great question. And maybe the theme of this is like, I would have answered one in the beginning and it's kind of changed. And I think that applies here as well. So with the naivete, again, in the beginning, I would have said, there's no right time. Just dive in, just go for it. Just like there's no right time to become a parent. Literally, there's not, right? You've just got to go for it and take the first step, create momentum, and things fall into place. You know, but now where I am now, having been on the journey, I would say that still applies, but there are things to think about and consider. And I look at it as macro and micro, kind of really high level and then more personal. You know, I think macro, you know, I would think about things like the idea you have, right? The problem you're looking to solve and sort of its applicability, and sort of thinking of things like cycles, tech cycles. You know, there is some of that. Like right now, you know, we have the internet cycle, and then fintech has had its cycle, and then we're in the AI sort of cycle. And I think there are macro considerations. You know, on the micro level, you know, I think there are things like, you know, how your life's set up and, you know, your personal situation. I also think finances are a key one that, you know, looking back, you know, I think a lot of entrepreneurs just feel like, you know, I'm gonna raise a massive round and it's all gonna be good, and like, you know, I pay myself a great salary and then have a great exit, and I hope for that for all of us, but the reality is that it could mean a pay cut, and it could mean sacrificing your savings, and it could mean going without a salary for portions of time. So I think there is a point about finances with timing of stepping into the entrepreneurial journey.
Is there one thing you would have done differently if you had to go back and start again?
I think it probably has to do with that point I just made. You know, just getting myself perhaps better prepared for it.
But still keeping the naivety.
I think just sort of, you know, maybe lining up the finances a bit better, you know, advocating for myself a bit more in terms of, you know, and a living wage and what I really needed to not have to worry about the bills and stuff. more the practical stuff that I didn't really see or appreciate at the beginning. Yeah.
And as you grow in the past few years, you know, the team expands, things happen. You just went through a crowdfunding a few months.
Yeah.
Was it a few months ago now?
It was, we closed it off in March.
Yeah.
So it was kind of February and March.
Yeah. What is it that helps you stay focused? Like just through all of the busyness, all of the moving parts. Sometimes things get complicated, they get overrun. What is it that just keeps you ticking forward?
Our customers.
Yeah.
100% our customers. I mean, on the, I was talking about the duality of foundership, right? The high highs and the low lows. You can have exhilarating days, right? But then you have really tough days. And on those tough days, I always find my motivation and drive. And it's something that started with Clover, that platform. Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You can start over again because we can edit it out.
Yeah. Yeah, so I talk about the duality of foundership, the high highs and low lows, and some days can be exhilarating. And then there's some days that are just tough, right? You face a crisis. And the days that are tough, I always find my motivation, my drive, my just sort of that oomph to get up and keep going through our customers. And it's something that started with Clover, that point of sale platform in the US, where the very first Clover that I installed, that point of sale, was at the pizzeria of a friend, right? Somebody who I cared about a lot. Cared about his business, and he was one of our first customers. And, you know, I would go there, you know, put it in, make sure everything was working, and just develop that sort of really sense of just, just personal connection to customers. And then from his pizzeria, it was sort of the neighborhood and different small businesses that I shopped at, and I loved kind of adopting the product. And that's where I really grew to value the personal connection and really understanding the value that your product or your service can have in people's lives, not just selling it and moving on, right? But really understanding how it's creating value, how they're using it, you know, feedback, what they'd like to see, and being there, right, in the businesses, watching them, observing them. And that is just so important. And I think it's translated to Belong as well, where our customers and the stories, right? And we have people who are taking that first step, and Belong is creating that moment of truth for them with investing.
Yeah, and I guess it helps the user, the customer, know that they're not alone as well, because I know you've talked a little bit about the power of community in that sense in terms of investing. You know, sometimes people want to hear that advice from their friend or someone who's also going through it instead of someone who's just trying to sell them another product.
Yeah, exactly. And we've gone through it. That's the thing with Sam and I, and a lot of our team, right? Like, we are our customers. You know, I was opting out of my pension and not doing the right thing with my money and not investing up to less than 10 years ago, probably 8 years ago. And Samantha, the same thing. She's an economist. And so, you know, we're out there telling our story. And so often we'd be in a room speaking to people, and you kind of say, like, are you investing? And people are like, oh yeah. Like, you know, I've thought of it. Yeah. And then when we say, you know, we weren't or we aren't, and you show that vulnerability, you almost see people just kind of like the pressure just melts away. The anxiety just melts away, and people just feel like, you know what, like, I wish I was doing more. I want to do more.
And as you get bigger, surely that's got to get harder. I mean, the more customers you have, the more you can't really have that one-on-one time to it. So I guess, how do you balance that personal connection with like the logistics and intricacies of building an actual business?
So there are ways that you can make communities scale. I think the initial stage, which is where we are right now, it's very high touch. So we host events. We've had events, customers host events where they invite their friends, and we come and we just have a conversation about belong. We're doing sessions at workplaces, so kind of meeting people where they work, where they want to have this conversation. And then we're looking at how does it scale? And I think, one way is through social media, right? So the way that we speak, we tell our story on social media is important. So we have a very popular campaign called How to Sound Smart at the Dinner Table this weekend.
Really?
All right.
I'm going to check it out now.
Yeah, on our Instagram, primarily Instagram account. So every Friday we drop a 90-second reel that is a very interesting story that you can tell at the dinner table this weekend. About 50% of them have a financial lesson, right? So there is a sort of just enlightenment play to it, financial enlightenment. So it's things like stock tickers. How were they created? Bull and bear. So we use bull to describe a stock market that's going up, and bear to describe when the market's coming down. Where did those terms originate? So, but we tell it in an interesting way, and then we have a lot of them that are just like the history of the marathon, that kind of thing. And so that's been extremely popular. So we've had reels in our dinner chat series that have gone viral, and the community's buzzing, all right, and people are engaging with it. And so it's another way that our approach can become scalable, because people are talking about these stories, going and telling their friends these stories.
And motivation is an interesting point that you set on as well. And is there any one time that you felt when you started, this might not work, or it's not going anywhere, and you had to get out of that, I guess, self-confidence hump? Because I feel like a lot of people will get into that point where they have this huge idea, they've found the market, they found it. You get those days that are much more complicated and not working like the rest of them. But yeah, I guess, how do you just keep yourself, and I know earlier I asked how you keep yourself ticking forward, but is there any one moment that's happened to you?
Oh, tons.
Yeah.
Countless. It's part of the course with being a founder. There are going to be naysayers. There are going to be people who just tell you it's impossible, right? There's going to be people who just think, why isn't some big bank doing this? But the things that keep us motivated, sometimes it's just the really rational thinking, right? Like, there is a market, right? There is that cash that people are sitting on, right, in the system. There are other platforms who haven't been able to mobilize and unlock it. And we are speaking to customers who derive value from this, right? Who are investing for the first time. Just logically, when you add these things up, right, belong needs to exist. Samantha and I have a unique approach. So in the demotivating things, it's yin and yang. So there are the people who are pushing us, are behind us, right? There are the investors who are saying, this needs to exist, right? This is a no-brainer. And I guess we sort of lean into those more. It does take radical optimism to be a founder. Huh?
I love that term.
It does. It literally, some investors call it grit, tenacity, but it's almost a stubbornness, right? That when certain boxes are ticked, like the market exists, the customers want it, we have a great vision, like all of these things are ticked, you almost just refuse to believe anything different, then you can do it. And then it really just comes down to the putting one foot in front of the next and actually physically finding the drive to get up and keep going, to send that other email, to send that next email, to make that next phone call, to have that meeting and just keep going, right? It's really stubborn. It's stubbornness
and naivety and courage,
naivety
all
and
those
grit
good words.
and literally in all of these things. Yeah.
I am curious as to, I mean, I know you went to university, you went to Stanford, that air, that energy, and then you worked for a company and then you helped them scale and launch and did all that stuff. But like, is there one big early sign that you had that maybe like in hindsight you were born to do this? Because I find like even a lot of my friends, they'll do stuff that's so entrepreneurial in their life, but they don't think of it until it just makes sense later on. So what are those early signs that you can sense are there that you want to do something different and that I guess you're destined to do something different?
So some of the decisions I've made as a young person, so I was just determined to go to university in the US and study finance. Right, my dad had studied finance, and so I when I was 17 years old in lower six, I was doing my A levels. So I was in lower six, which is kind of the first part, and then you do upper six, which is the second part, and you do A levels. Got my cousin coming from the US to get me an SAT book, right, and I studied at night.
Okay.
So I went to school in the day and I would study for like 2-3 hours at night, the SATs. My parents didn't have to ask me to do it. I was just determined, right? That I would do this and I would go to the US and go to university, studied at night, sat the SATs. I think my parents gave me the money to actually pay for the exam, but like sat the SATs, got great scores and got a full scholarship, and left Trinidad a year early to start university. So I've always been a year younger than the rest of my class. And then the decision to just apply to Stanford and just go out there to Silicon Valley when I had no exposure to tech prior to that. It's just always been a curiosity, really. You know, just never feeling like I couldn't do something. It was like I had the tools, I had a brain, I got the book, I could study, like I had the tools and I was curious and I wanted to do it and I had that resolve. And yeah, and also courage, right? Like both of those decisions took a lot of courage.
Yeah, I guess even on that point of like, you know, there's no reason you couldn't have done it, but even if you couldn't, then you just got to prove that differently. Like, of course you can. You can just do anything that you really set out to.
Yeah.
If there was one person today that reminded you of your younger self, what would you tell them to follow through with that early determination they might not see in themselves? Because it is hard to see it when it happens. Now in hindsight, it's easy to talk about it. But what would you say to someone that might have been in your shoes one day, but it just isn't noticing those early signs, but can do whatever they set out to accomplish?
I would say to them, or I would ask them, what's stopping you, right? Like, there's nothing stopping you from going after something or accomplishing something. What really gets in our way is ourselves, right? We get in our own way. And sometimes we believe what people say, right? And I've learned through my own journey that there will always be detractors, right? If 100% of people you met along your way always supported you, right? Like, just think about, like, we'd be completely different people, right? Like, our realities would be different if all we got was support. There would always be detractors, and you almost need to turn that into fuel. Really turn that into fuel. And that's what I've done. And I think, you know, that's one thing that I would say. And the other thing that I would say is a lot of it comes from within, right? But I've also learned that our resources can be external as well. So when you look around you, right, it's sort of, you know, who in your family, your friend network, your community, can almost sees things in you that you don't see and has additional resources that can help you, right? So we would not be where we are now today with Belong without the advice, like, honestly, the advisors, the friends of Belong, we call them, people who believe in us and in our mission and what we're doing, who have cracked doors open for us that we come just blasting through. Or, like, you know, made introductions, planted seeds, started sparks that turned into fires. And, we would not be where we are today. So I think a lot of this too is finding the strength, the courage within yourself, but then also not being afraid to ask for help and not being afraid to lean on others.
Everybody says to take up every opportunity that's in front of you and don't take advantage of it. Yet sometimes if you go to a few networking events and nothing comes from it, you get quite drained.
Yeah.
But then all it takes is just a coffee chat with someone
That's
who's going to
exactly
pick you up, or someone who's actually going to put you down, and then you're like, I have to prove them differently. So
that's exactly it. That's exactly. It's just so interesting. You just never know where those conversations are going to happen or who that person is going to be. And when you approach each event, each meeting, whatever, with that sort of curiosity, back to curiosity of who is that person in this room who's gonna give me that gem, or light that spark, and just almost just wanting it, manifesting it. I think a lot of times it's just opening yourself up to it, being receptive. But I am an extrovert, just naturally, and so I sort of thrive on that, right? Finding that person in a room who's gonna create some sort of an unlock for me.
And that also goes into the vision, I guess, of being belonging, but also thinking of that long-term view, chase your dreams, be open to those chance encounters and follow through with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Well, that said, we are unfortunately out of time, but is there any one last thing that you want to leave with the audience today?
Probably one of the biggest learnings or insights I've had as a founder, which is, it's perspective really matters, right? And the day that I just saw my role as a founder as being a connector of dots was the day that I really had a big epiphany, right? And a perspective shift in my role. And so things can seem so big, right? The mission, the dream, the team, the business, fundraising, it can all seem so big and overwhelming. But breaking it down into sort of manageable bits is sort of something that I practice every day. So I view my role as being the person who identifies dots and then connects them.
One dot at a time.
One dot at a time, exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was great to have you.
Thanks for having me.